The sky above Elter 9 burned like a dying star, a swirling bruise of violet and crimson gas clouds streaking across the upper atmosphere. What had once been a sapphire blue sky, nurturing the first Terran colonies beyond the Orion Belt, was now a toxic aurora born from orbital bombardments and centuries of chemical warfare. Commander Alira. Vance gripped the edge of the crash harness as the Vanguard-class dropship screamed. Through the thin upper layers of the atmosphere, each jolt shook the hull, each spark of plasma outside the viewport another reminder that this mission, maybe humanity's last on Elter, was being held together by sheer willpower and a few bolts of stubborn steel. 30 seconds to insertion, came the voice of Lieutenant Kale Drace from the cockpit, distorted by static. Landing zone is hot, Commander. Dominion drones are everywhere. Just get us on the ground, Alira said, adjusting the magnetic lock on her Haven MK for Exasuit. We've finished the job before they even know we're here. The job. It sounded simple on paper. Infiltrate the ruins of New Helios. Locate the buried chamber beneath the old Ascendancy biotech complex. And retrieve the Apex Codex, the lost genetic matrix said to hold the key to humanity's next evolution. But nothing about this mission was simple. Elter 9 was a graveyard. 32 years ago, the Dominion, a breakaway faction of enhanced posthumans, had turned the world into a proving ground for their twisted bioexperiments. Whole cities were glassed, civilizations erased. The Dominion's null spawn, biomechanical predators grown from stolen DNA, now roamed the wastelands. Even orbital scans couldn't map the terrain anymore. It was too unstable, too alien, and yet, somewhere beneath the ashen ruin, the Codex still pulsed, hidden, waiting. Alira wasn't sure why the thought chilled her more than it comforted her. The dropship bucked violently as flak exploded nearby. A blinding light burst across the viewport, followed by an ear-splitting crack. Starboard thruster hit. Kale shouted, "We're going in hard." The ground surged upward like a tidal wave of blackened forest and shattered ferrocrete. The Vanguard slammed into the earth with a metallic roar, throwing Alira against her harness. Sparks and smoke filled the cabin. For a long, breathless moment, there was only silence. Then the hiss of atmosphere leaking through ruptured plating. "Kale!" Alira shouted, forcing the harness release. Her muscles ached as she crawled through the wreckage. Status: no response. The cockpit was engulfed in flames, the bulkhead half collapsed. She didn't have time to check if anyone else had survived. She could already hear them. The howl. It started low, a resonant, guttural sound that seemed to vibrate in her bones. Then came another, and another. Dozens, maybe more. They were close, null spawn. Alira muttered. Perfect. She yanked her pulse blade from its magnetic sheath, its edge humming to life with a faint blue glow. Then she pried open the emergency hatch and stumbled into the night. The forest was no longer a forest. What once might have been towering obsidian pines were now petrified spires, twisted into unnatural shapes, their branches forming jagged silhouettes against the bruised sky. The ground was soft and warm, too warm, pulsing faintly beneath her boots, like the veins of a living thing. It reeked of ozone, decay, and wet metal. Alira touched the side of her helmet. But the comm system was dead. No uplink, no orbital support, no team. She was alone. Blood dripped steadily from a gash in her left arm where the crash harness had bitten deep. She sealed the wound with a coagulant patch, but some of it still seeped through, warm and sticky beneath her armor. It would have to do. She needed to move. The objective was 10 clicks north, buried beneath the ruins of Sector Theta. But she'd be lucky to make it 10 meters if the null spawn pack had already scented her. And they had. The howling grew louder, closer. Shadows flitted between the trees. Shapes with too many joints, too many eyes. Predators that moved like liquid nightmares. Alira knelt and steadied her breath, remembering the first lesson they taught you in the frontier corps. If you run from a predator, you become prey. The first null spawn emerged from the tree line alive. Quadrupedal creature with chitinous plating that shimmered like oil under the broken moonlight. Its mouth split open in a wet, metallic hiss. Then another appeared, and another. 6 of them. Small by null spawn standards, juveniles, maybe. Cubs. Alira's grip on her pulse blade tightened. Juveniles were often worse than adults, faster, less predictable, desperate to prove themselves. They spread out in a semicircle, nostrils flaring as they picked up the scent of her blood. She braced for the attack, but it didn't come. One by one, the cubs froze mid-step, their movements halting as if some invisible signal had reached them. Their eyes, glowing rings of bioluminescent amber, widened. Their chests rose and fell rapidly. The largest of them, a silver-furred alpha barely shoulder-high to Alira, tilted its head. Then, in a voice that was more echo than speech, a glitching harmony of animal instinct and coded language, it rasped, "That's Apex." Alira felt the blood drain from her face. She took a step back, pulse racing. They knew her. No, not her. Something in her. Something older, deeper, more fundamental than even she understood. And for the first time since the crash, Alira Vance felt something she hadn't felt in years. Not fear, recognition. The cubs lowered themselves to the ground, not in attack stance, but in submission. They watched her with something resembling reverence, as if the blood dripping from her wound was more sacred than prey, more dangerous than predator. The wind howled through the twisted trees, carrying the distant thunder of Dominion patrol drones. But in the circle of predators around her, there was silence, and in that silence, Alira's mission shifted. The Apex Codex wasn't buried in some vault beneath Sector Theta. It was already inside her. The forest around her pulsed with a strange, quiet energy. The null-spawn cubs, 6 of them, no larger than hunting hounds, had formed a loose semicircle. Their sinewy frames tense, but no longer coiled to strike. Their glowing amber eyes were fixed on Alira, not with hunger, but with something disturbingly close to awe. They knew her blood, and that changed everything. Alira stood motionless, pulse blades still humming softly in her grip. She didn't dare lower it, not yet. Nullspawn were unpredictable, even the young, especially the young. One twitch, one wrong movement, and they could shift from curious to lethal in an instant. But their behavior wasn't aggression. It was recognition. Apex, the alpha cub repeated in that eerie, half-machine rasp, the word vibrating through the quiet like a memory spoken aloud. Alira felt her breath catch. She'd heard that term before, Apex, but only whispered, and only in classified briefings buried beneath layers of clearance codes. It had always been theoretical, a ghost of a concept from humanity's most ambitious and most dangerous bioengineering project. Now, hearing it spoken by something inhuman was like seeing a secret. You weren't meant to witness suddenly staring back. The largest cub took a cautious step forward. Its plating shifted color, a chameleon's shimmer sliding from oily black to soft silver. It sniffed the air, then the ground, then crept closer until it was barely 2 meters away. Alira tightened her grip on her blade, but didn't move. It stopped when her blood hit the soil. A thin crimson drop had fallen from her bandaged arm and sunk into the ashen dirt. The nullspawn inhaled deeply, tremors running through its lithe body. Then, in a display she'd never seen before, it lowered its head to the ground. The others followed suit. 6 biomechanical predators, apex hunters engineered to stalk and dismantle anything with a pulse, were now bowing before her like a pack. Before its queen, Alira's throat felt dry. What the hell is happening? No one answered. Only the sound of wind moving through petrified trees. Memories of blood. Her mind reeled back to the cold, sterile halls of Ascendancy Station, orbiting a nameless dwarf star on the edge of Dominion space. She was 19 then, a decorated cadet with perfect scores in adaptability and zero-G combat. That's why they picked her. That's what they told her. "You're humanity's next step, Vance," Director Halden had said, his voice as warm as the steel floors beneath her boots. "We're not trying to make a soldier. We're trying to evolve one." Then came the injections, the genetic grafts, the deep sequence resequencing that rewrote the blueprint of who she was. Days blurred into weeks, then months. They measured her reflexes, her bone density, her healing rate. They called her a success, but they never told her what they'd put inside her. And when the project was mysteriously terminated 3 years later, its records deleted and its staff scattered, Alira assumed it was over, that whatever they'd done to her was inert, forgotten. Clearly, it wasn't. A language older than word Shalfa cub, its bioluminescent veins now glowing a soft cerulean, crept closer still. until its snout hovered inches from Alira's leg armor. It sniffed again, then emitted a strange clicking pattern, almost like coded pulses. Carven. Apex, the others responded in kind. Short bursts of chirps, whistles, and low-frequency growls, a primitive language of sorts, but layered with something deeper. Embedded signals, data hidden in sound. They were communicating about her, and though Alira couldn't decipher their meaning, the tone was unmistakable deference. They revere you, she whispered to herself. But why? Because of her blood? Because of something deeper? Were the null spawn designed to respond to it? Or had something more primal taken root in their biology over decades of exposure? A sudden crackle of static broke her thoughts. Ira. Vance, do you copy? Her heart leapt. She tapped the side of her helmet. This is Vance, she hissed. Kale, is that you? Alive, came the distorted reply. Eject pod deployed to clicks west. I'm pinned. Dominion patrols inbound. Repeat, patrols inbound. Hold position, she said, eyes still locked on the pack. I'm on my way. Negative. Kel's voice cut out in a burst of static. The Cub's choice. Alira took a step back. The Cubs mirrored her movement, not hostile, but unwilling to let her leave. The Alpha tilted its head, emitting another series of clicks and pulses. Then, to her astonishment, it turned and started padding north, toward the direction of the Ascendancy ruins. It looked back once, amber eyes glinting in the dark, as if beckoning her to follow. No way, she muttered. You know where it is, don't you? The others joined the Alpha, forming a loose column and moving deeper into the forest. Glancing over their shoulders as if making sure she was coming, Alira hesitated. Following them was insane, a tactical risk with 1,000 ways to die. And yet, this wasn't random behavior. They weren't hunting her. They were guiding her. Maybe to the Codex, maybe to something worse. Her mission had just shifted from infiltration to something much more dangerous and much more personal. She sheathed her blade and started after them. Shadows of the Dominion they trekked through the ruins was surreal. The Cubs moved like phantoms, slipping through the skeletal remains of cities swallowed by nature and nanotech alike. Spires of corroded metal jutted from the ground like broken bones. Rivers of black coolant trickled beneath cracked ferrocrete streets. And everywhere, Dominion tech. Observation drones buzzed overhead, their red optics scanning the landscape. Patrol mechs clanked through the wreckage, scanning for intruders. Alira stayed low, moving when they moved, guided by the pack's uncanny awareness of every sensor's blind spot. They're not just animals, she whispered. They understand. As they neared the outskirts of what once had been the Ascendancy biotech complex, the Cubs suddenly halted. The Alpha crouched low and emitted a warning growl. Alira froze, and then she heard it. Bootsteps. Voices. Signal came from this quadrant. Command wants eyes on immediately. A Dominion patrol, for soldiers in adaptive camo armor. Plasma carbines drawn. They moved with military precision, scanning the perimeter. Alira ducked behind a collapsed column and killed her suit lights. Her heart hammered. The Cubs, too, melted into the shadows, silent as mist. The lead soldier paused. Did you hear that? Probably nothing, another replied. No life signs on scan. The first soldier frowned, tapping his helmet. Still, check thermal. Just in case. Alira's blood ran cold. Thermal would pick her up. And maybe the pack. She gripped her pulse blade. Options were limited. Fight, and the noise would bring more. Run, and Kale, and the Codex would be lost. The Cubs shifted, low growls vibrating through the ground. They were waiting for her signal, waiting for Apex to decide. For the first time in her life, Alira felt the gravity of what that word meant. She wasn't just the mission anymore, that she was the key. She raised her hand slowly, a single, silent signal. The Cubs vanished into the dark. A second later, the night exploded with motion. The first Dominion soldier never saw the Cub that killed him. 1 second he was sweeping the undergrowth with a thermal scanner, muttering about false positives. The next, a blur of silver and black crashed into him from the shadows, knocking him off his feet with a sickening crack. His scream was short-lived. The null-spawn Cub's jaw unhinged like a machine press, crushing his throat before he could reach for the trigger. Contact! Contact! Another shouted, plasma carbine flaring to life. Bolts of superheated light tore through the forest, searing bark and splitting petrified branches. The cubs scattered, darting between ruins and shadows, moving with terrifying speed, not wild, chaotic attacks, but coordinated strikes. They hunted like a pack that had done this before. Alira didn't waste the distraction. She vaulted over the collapsed column and charged. The second soldier turned to late. Her pulse blade sliced through his weapon, splitting it into molten halves before the return swing severed the power pack on his chest. The blast hurled him backward in a cloud of sparks. Fall back. They're not standard hostiles. The squad leader yelled dot, but the cubs were already among them. One leapt from the canopy, tearing a third soldier's helmet clean off. Another dragged the last into the underbrush, his screams fading quickly into silence. Then there was only the sound of labored breathing, Alira's, and the soft, wet panting of the pack. She stood amid the carnage, pulse blade dripping with plasma-lit steam. Around her, the cubs circled once before settling into a tight formation, eyes fixed on her. It wasn't just deference anymore. It was waiting, expectation. There, taking orders, she murmured. A name from the past. Alira wiped the blood from her visor and surveyed the remains of the Dominion. Patrol. Their armor was newer than she expected, sleeker, more advanced. They weren't scavengers. They were operators, which meant the Dominion was already deep inside the sector. And that meant time was running out. Kale, she whispered into her calm, hoping the signal still carried. I'm en route. Hold tight. No response. Just static. She turned to the alpha cub. Show me. It blinked once, a strangely human gesture, then padded northward again, deeper into the ruins. Alira followed, stepping over the charred remains of once grand streets. They passed murals etched into ferrocrete walls, faded now, but still legible. Human hands, human ambition, words like ascendancy and transcend beyond flesh scrawled across the remnants of research outposts. At the heart of New Helios, beneath the collapsed dome of what had once been the Ascendancy Biotech Complex, the Alpha stopped, its head tilted toward a half-buried blast door, its surface rusted but still intact. The symbol on it made Alira's chest tighten, a spiral of intertwined helixes. The emblem of Project Apex. It was no myth, no rumor. She had been here before. The memories returned with unsettling clarity. She was 16, fresh from the academy, when Director Halden first brought her planetside. This is the cradle of the future, he had said, guiding her past rows of gene vats and suspended biocores. The Codex is not just a tool. It's a template, a new language written into the human genome. What happens when the Dominion gets it? She'd asked. He had smiled. Then humanity is obsolete. It was the first time she ever felt fear in a lab. Now, standing in the ruins of that same facility decades later, the fear returned. But it wasn't just fear of the Codex anymore. It was fear of herself and what she might already be. Bloodlines and betrayal. Blast door was sealed, but null-spawn claws made quick work of the corroded lock. The massive slab hissed open, revealing a tunnel sloping down into the earth. Faint blue light pulsed along its walls. Power still flowing after 32 years. They descended in silence. The deeper they went, the more the air changed, cooler, denser, and saturated with the scent of metal and something organic. It was the smell of a womb too large to comprehend. At the tunnel's end lay a vast chamber, half laboratory, half cathedral. Stasis pods lined the walls, most shattered, their contents long gone. In the center, a daze rose from the floor, surrounded by ancient HOLO-terminals. And on that daze, suspended in a column of amber light, was a codex core, a sphere of latticework metal and organic matter, pulsing like a beating heart. Alira's knees nearly buckled. It was real. And it was alive. A voice cut through the silence. Took you long enough. Alira spun, pulse blade ready, and froze, there, leaning against a shattered console. His armor scorched but intact was Lieutenant Kale Drace. His left arm was in a makeshift sling, and blood streaked the side of his face. But the trademark smirk was still there. You look like hell, she said, lowering her blade. Good to see you too, Commander. He stepped forward, his gaze flicking from her to the null-spawn pack prowling at her heels. I see you made some. Friends, it's complicated. It always is with you. She allowed herself a faint smile, but it faded as Kel's expression hardened. You know what that is, don't you? He asked, nodding toward the pulsing sphere. The codex, she said quietly. He shook his head. No, you. The words hit her harder than any blow. What are you talking about? Cale limped closer, his voice lowering. I did some digging before we left. Classified records. Buried files from Ascendancy. The codex isn't a thing you recover. It's a seed, an adaptive genome meant to graft itself into a human host. The prototypes failed. Until they didn't. Alira's mouth went dry. Until me, you're not just the key to activating the codex, he said. You are the codex. The matriarch's call, a deep, resonant sound rolled through the chamber. So low it rattled the glass in the stasis pods. The cubs went still, their ears flattening, their bodies tensing. Alira's heart skipped. What is that? Cale asked. The Alpha turned toward the far wall, where a massive gate, easily 5 stories high, began to open. Steam hissed from ancient hydraulics. Darkness yawned beyond. Then she stepped through. The null matriarch was unlike anything Alira had seen. Twice the size of a dropship, her body a grotesque fusion of flesh, alloy, and coiled muscle. Eyes like burning stars locked onto Alira, nostrils flaring. The cubs dropped low, whining softly. She knows, Alira whispered. Knows what? That I'm not prey. The matriarch took one step forward, then another, each one shaking the ground. She lowered her massive head until her snout was inches from Alira's chest. The air between them vibrated, a pulse, a resonance. Then, in a voice so ancient and broken it was barely language, she spoke a single word, Apex. The chamber fell silent. Even the codex core seemed to pulse in rhythm with the word. Cale stared at Alira. What does that mean? It means. She stepped toward the matriarch, her heartbeat steady now, her fear gone. I'm not here to retrieve the codex. Her eyes locked on the pulsing sphere, on the biomechanical queen bowing her massive head, on the cubs arrayed like an army waiting for orders. I'm here to wake it up. The matriarch's breath was hot against Alira's face, a storm of ozone and iron. Her massive, biomechanical skull hovered inches from the human woman's chest, the scent of ancient DNA recognition thrumming between them like static. Apex. The matriarch growled again, more clearly this time, the syllables scraping like stone dragged across metal. The word didn't feel like a label anymore. It was a designation, a call to ascend, and Alira felt something deep within her stir, not a thought, not a memory, but a response written into the very architecture of her being. She was no longer just Commander Vance of the Vanguard Corps. She was the Codex, the culmination of Project Ascendancy, the living blueprint of the next stage of humanity. And the world, no, the galaxy, was about to know it. The Dominion Arivest chamber lights flared red. A piercing alarm wailed through the ancient facility, echoing against steel and stone. Kel's head snapped toward the upper levels, his expression grim. Contacts, he hissed. Multiple dropships inbound. Dominion strike teams. They must have tracked the patrol. Alira clenched her jaw. They were early, too early. And if Dominion Command suspected the Codex was active, they wouldn't be sending retrieval squads. They'd be sending extermination units. We're out of time, Cale said, gripping his plasma rifle with his good arm. We need to move. No, Alira replied quietly. Cale turned, incredulous. No, are you insane? They'll kill us both before we're halfway to orbit. They're not here for us, Cale, she said, stepping closer to the Codex core. Its latticework pulsed in sync with her heartbeat now, like the two were resonating. They're here for me, and I'm done running. The awakened Angelera reached out and touched the Codex. The instant her fingers brushed its surface, the chamber exploded with light. Holographic data spiraled into the air, strings of biodigital code unfolding like living DNA. She gasped as a surge of heat and knowledge coursed through her veins. Memories that weren't hers flooding her mind. Worlds beyond the known frontier. Architect species that had come before humanity. Their designs, their experiments, their failures, all of it woven into the Codex. And at the center of it all, a directive encoded in the deepest layers of its structure: evolve or perish. Her body convulsed. Veins glowed faintly beneath her skin, her pupils dilating into vertical slits. The wound on her arm sealed in seconds. Muscles tightened, bones reinforced themselves, neural activity spiked tenfold. Alira. Kale whispered, backing away. What's happening to you? She turned to him, and for a moment, he didn't see his commander. He saw something beyond human, something primal, beautiful, and terrifying. Ascendancy, she said, voice layered with a deeper resonance. It wasn't about creating soldiers. It was about creating shepherds. The battle begins. The first explosion ripped through the upper deck, showering the chamber with dust and debris. Dominion troopers poured through the breach, 100 of them in tactical black armor, weapons primed. They moved with machine precision, encircling the days. Stand down. Their commander barked through an external amplifier. By order of the Dominion Council, you are to surrender the codex and submit to containment. Alira smiled faintly. Containment, she murmured. You have no idea what you're standing in front of. Kale raised his rifle. We're surrounded. Not we, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. They. A guttural chorus shook the chamber as the cubs emerged from the shadows, fangs bared. Above them, the matriarch roared, a sound that shattered glass and made even hardened Dominion soldiers flinch. Then the nullspawn charged. The first wave of troopers was torn apart before they could react. Plasma fire lit the chamber in blinding arcs, carving molten streaks across the floor. But the pack was too fast, too relentless. They were no longer hunting for food. They were fighting for their apex. Kale joined the fray, covering Alira's flank with well-placed bursts. For every Dominion soldier he dropped, 2 more appeared. They moved with singular focus, not trying to kill her, but to capture her. Alira. Kale shouted over the din. We're being overrun. Not yet, she replied. A new Dominion stepped down from the days, the codex's light still pulsing behind her, and raised her hands. Instantly, every nullspawn froze mid-lunge, their bodies trembling as if caught in invisible threads. Even the matriarch halted, towering over the battlefield like a living monolith. The Dominion soldiers hesitated, confused by the sudden stillness. And then Alira spoke. Her words were simple, but they were not spoken in human language. Vrunkathul. In Taran, the phrase rolled off her tongue like an ancient command, and the nullspawn obeyed. They didn't just resume their assault, they evolved it. Their movements became synchronized, tactical, flanking, suppressing, overwhelming. It wasn't a pack anymore. It was an army, guided by one will. Her will. Dear gods, Kale muttered. You're controlling them, not controlling, she said softly, watching as the Dominion line crumbled under the coordinated onslaught. Leading, the choicest battle was over within minutes. The few remaining Dominion soldiers dropped their weapons and fell to their knees, surrounded by snarling nullspawn and the looming shadow of the matriarch. Alira walked among them, her armor scorched, her pulse steady. The survivors stared at her with a mixture of terror and reverence, the same look the cubs had given her in the forest. Apex, one of them whispered, voice trembling. It's real. She stopped before him. Tell your masters, she said quietly. Humanity will not be contained. Evolution does not ask for permission. Are you going to kill us? He asked. Alira considered it, the simplicity of vengeance, the finality of it. But vengeance was a human impulse, and she was beyond that now. No, she said. You're going to deliver a message. Apex rising hours later. The fires of the Dominion assault still burned across the ruins of New Helios. Alira stood atop the ancient days once more, gazing up through the broken dome at the violet sky beyond. Kale approached, his armor battered, his face streaked with grime and disbelief. So what now? He asked. You've got an army of bioengineered predators at your back. The Dominion's terrified. The Republic will be too. Are you planning to conquer the galaxy? Alira shook her head slowly. Conquest is for empires. This is bigger, bigger. She looked down at her hands, hands that no longer trembled, no longer felt entirely human. The Codex wasn't built to rule. It was built to guide, to push every species, human, Dominion, nullspawn, toward what comes next. Kale frowned. And what is next? Alira turned her eyes to the horizon, where distant stars burned brighter than they ever had before. Whatever we decide, she said. No more masters, no more extinction. From this day forward, we are not prey or predator. We are not dominion or republic. We are apex. The matriarch howled behind her, the cubs joining in, their chorus echoing through the ruined city like the birth cry of a new era. And somewhere, deep beneath the surface of Ultra 9, the codex pulsed, no longer dormant, no longer hidden. Awake. Alive. And ready to rewrite the universe.